There comes a moment in every life when a person looks around and realizes they've been running in circles, chasing approval, chasing applause, chasing a kind of peace that always slips away the moment they reach for it. That moment came for Ethan Monroe one cold morning in Chicago, when he stood in front of the mirror, tie half knotted, eyes weary from trying too hard to be everything to everyone. His career was rising, but his spirit was sinking. He didn't know it yet, but that morning would mark the beginning of his greatest discovery, the power of inner direction. Part 1. The law of inner direction. Ethan had built his life on other people's opinions. Every move, every word, every decision was measured by how it would look to others. His boss's approval meant success. His friends' praise meant validation. But the more he tried to please the world, the emptier he felt inside. His achievements sparkled on paper, yet his heart felt hollow. That morning, as he rode the train downtown, a strange thought crossed his mind. What if peace wasn't found in applause, but in alignment? What if he had spent his whole life shining outward when the real light was supposed to shine within? A few hours later, during lunch, Ethan met an old mentor named Mr. Carver, a man known for his calm wisdom and unshakable presence. He had once been a corporate giant but had retired early, content and peaceful in a small house by the lake. Ethan, desperate for direction, asked, "How do you stay so calm, so confident, while the rest of us are running ourselves into the ground?" Mr. Carver smiled. "Because I stopped running. You see, Ethan, the world does not shape your destiny, your thoughts do. Whatever rules within your mind will soon rule without. You're exhausted because your attention is divided. Energy follows attention, and you've given yours away." The words hit Ethan hard. For the first time, he understood. His exhaustion wasn't from overwork, it was from misdirection. He had been watering other people's fields, leaving his own barren. That evening, instead of checking emails or scrolling through social media, he sat quietly in his apartment and began to observe his thoughts. He noticed how quickly his mind drifted, to comparisons, to fears, to imagined judgments. And every time it did, he gently pulled it back. "No," he whispered. "I choose what I think." In that simple act, something shifted. It was as if he had found the steering wheel of his own soul. He remembered what Mr. Carver had said. "Focus is not a luxury, it is the foundation of power. When attention is scattered, strength is wasted. But when it's fixed on a single worthy aim, the universe aligns to assist." The next morning, Ethan began a new ritual. Before his coffee, before his phone, he sat still for 5 minutes and chose one thought to hold. Sometimes it was courage. Sometimes gratitude. Sometimes calm determination. And with each passing day, he noticed something subtle yet powerful. The world seemed to respond differently. When his coworkers complained, he stayed silent. When problems arose, he didn't panic. When others sought validation, he quietly focused on solutions. His calmness began to draw respect. What he had been chasing all his life, admiration, peace, confidence, was now chasing him. Mr. Carver later told him, "Every great man learns this truth: no one can think your thoughts for you. The Creator gave each of us the sacred power of choice. What you dwell upon, you draw into your world. Dwell on fear, and fear grows. Dwell on purpose, and purpose rises like the morning sun." Ethan tested it daily. On bad days, he caught himself falling into complaint or envy. Instead of feeding it, he replaced it with gratitude. When he felt weak, he visualized strength. When he felt lost, he repeated quietly, "I am the captain of my mind." And each time he did, his energy rose, his focus sharpened, and life began to flow more smoothly. Weeks turned into months, and Ethan noticed a profound change. Opportunities began appearing from unexpected places. His ideas were recognized not because he demanded attention, but because he carried authority within himself. He no longer needed to shout. His calm spoke for him. One night, as he reflected by the window overlooking the city, he wrote in his journal, "The first law of progress is self-direction. No one can live my life for me. My destiny is the echo of my attention. If I master my focus, I master my fate." He smiled as he closed the notebook. For the first time in years, he felt peace, not the fragile peace of approval, but the solid peace of inner command. And so, the lesson of part 1 was sealed in his heart. When a man rules his thoughts, he rules his life. The key to power, peace, and prosperity lies not in controlling others, but in mastering the direction of one's own mind. As he drifted to sleep that night, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow, he would learn the next step, the art of shifting the current of his own energy. But tonight, he rested as a man who had finally come home to himself. Would you like me to continue with part 2, shifting the current of your energy next, in the same story style, 1000 words, easy English, for American readers? Hook. There are moments in life when everything seems to slow down, when time itself feels like it's waiting for you to make a choice. That moment came to Ethan Monroe one evening as he watched the rain fall against his window. The city below him was alive with noise, honking cars, flashing lights, restless movement, but inside his apartment, all was still. It had been weeks since he began practicing inner direction. He no longer lived at the mercy of chaos. But now, he sensed something deeper calling, a new level of mastery, one that required patience, faith, and calm power. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to discover the secret law that separates those who drift from those who grow. Part 2, The Silent Law of Growth. Ethan had spent most of his life trying to force things, success, recognition, happiness. If something didn't come quickly, he'd push harder, work longer, and worry more. But now, under the quiet influence of his mentor Mr. Carver, he was beginning to see life differently. Growth, he realized, wasn't a sprint. It was a slow unfolding, much like nature itself. One Sunday morning, Mr. Carver invited him to his countryside home. The lake shimmered beneath a soft sunrise, and a small garden grew beside the porch. "Do you see those oaks?" Mr. Carver said, pointing toward the trees that lined the water. "I planted them 20 years ago. For the first few years, I saw almost nothing. But underground, they were building roots. That's how true growth works, quietly, unseen, but unstoppable." Ethan nodded, remembering how restless he used to feel when results didn't appear fast enough. "I always thought growth meant constant action," he admitted. "That if I wasn't moving forward, I was falling behind." Mr. Carver smiled. "No, my boy. You can't force growth any more than you can pull a flower from the ground. You can only prepare the soil. Every thought you hold is a seed. Every act repeated becomes a root. Tend to your inner garden with care, and life will do the rest." That evening, back in the city, Ethan began a new practice. Instead of measuring his days by achievements, he began measuring them by alignment. How often he stayed calm, how consistently he guarded his thoughts, how deeply he trusted the unseen process of growth. When impatience whispered that success was taking too long, he reminded himself, nature takes her time, yet she never fails. He began to see that every challenge was not a punishment, but preparation. When work became stressful, he treated it as soil being broken for new roots. When a friend disappointed him, he saw it as pruning, removing what no longer served his peace. Slowly, a deeper strength took root within him. Weeks later, he visited the park near his apartment and noticed a gardener planting flowers. Curious, Ethan asked, "How do you know they'll bloom? You can't see what's happening underground." The gardener looked up, smiling. "I don't need to see it. I trust the process. Growth requires faith and time." Those words echoed in Ethan's mind for days. Faith and time. That was the lesson he had resisted all his life. He had uprooted his own progress too often by doubting the soil that sustained him. But now, he was learning to remain planted, to stay the course, even when results were invisible. Each morning, he repeated a quiet affirmation. "Though I see no results today, I know that life is working for me, not against me." Those words became his anchor. His anxiety softened. His focus deepened. And in that faith, his inner world began to bloom. One night, while journaling, Ethan wrote, "Growth never shouts. It works in silence. What I feed through attention grows. What I neglect fades." And then he underlined a single sentence. "Patience is not waiting, it is trusting." Months passed, and the results of his inner discipline began to show outwardly. His coworkers noticed a calmness in his voice. His decisions carried new confidence. Even his setbacks no longer shook him. The same man who once panicked over small delays now smiled through them, knowing that every trial was shaping him for something greater. Mr. Carver saw this transformation and said, "Now you understand the fourth law, the silent law of growth. When you learn to trust the unseen process, the world will move in rhythm with your faith. But growth alone was not enough. True transformation, Mr. Carver explained, required a new way of thinking, clear, right, and disciplined thought. And so began Ethan's next lesson. The habit of right thinking. It started one morning when Ethan caught himself worrying about things that hadn't even happened. He realized how easily his thoughts drifted into fear, doubt, and self-criticism. That evening, Mr. Carver gave him a simple but powerful challenge. Take inventory of your thoughts as a merchant takes account of his goods. Keep only those that serve your purpose. Discard the rest. For the next week, Ethan carried a small notebook. Every time a negative or wasteful thought appeared, he wrote it down. By nightfall, he reviewed the list, and it shocked him how much energy he had been wasting. Fear of failure. Worry about what others thought. Regret over the past. It was like discovering leaks in a ship he hadn't realized was sinking. The following morning, he began the process of choosing better thoughts. When fear whispered, "You can't," he replaced it with, "I can and I will." When envy crept in, he replaced it with gratitude. When impatience rose, he said, "Growth is at work even now." In time, these new thoughts began to form a habit. His mind, once restless and scattered, began to obey his direction. He understood what Mr. Carver meant when he said, "The mind is a servant until you make it a master." Ethan learned that right thinking meant more than optimism. It was disciplined belief. It was the art of guarding the inner gate of the mind and allowing only thoughts that built strength, peace, and purpose. He discovered that the world outside was only a reflection of the world within. When his inner world became orderly, his outer life followed. He wrote in his journal, "Before I act, I will think rightly. Before I speak, I will think kindly. Before I judge, I will think fairly." That simple rule changed everything. His words carried more weight. His choices became clearer. And the more he practiced right thinking, the more aligned his life became with peace and purpose. One evening, Mr. Carver told him, "When your mind is right, life aligns itself accordingly. You have learned the law of right thinking, and soon, you will learn its companion, faith in action." Ethan nodded, sensing the next chapter of his transformation approaching. He now knew that growth and right thinking were two halves of the same law. Growth was the silent process that shaped the roots. Right thinking was the sunlight that nourished them. As the night deepened, he looked out once more at the city lights below. Everything looked the same, but something inside him had changed forever. The noise of the world no longer dictated his peace. He had found a rhythm, a stillness, a purpose that came not from chasing results, but from mastering the soil of his own mind. He smiled and whispered to himself, "Growth begins unseen, but its fruits endure forever." And with that, Ethan turned off the light, ready to step into his next lesson, the power of faith in action. Would you like me to continue with part 3, the power of faith in action next? Same story style, 1,000 words, easy English, for American readers? Hook. There comes a moment in every person's life when comfort whispers louder than purpose. When the bed feels warmer than the dream, when the easy road looks safer than the right one. Yet, it is in that moment, when no one is watching, when your emotions fight your will, that greatness is either born or buried. Part 3, the law of discipline, persistence, and adversity. Daniel woke before dawn, as he always did. The streets outside were silent, washed in the gray mist of early morning. On his small desk sat an open notebook, its first page read in bold letters, "Master yourself, and you master the world." He had written those words 6 months ago, the day he decided to change his life. Daniel was tired of half-started goals, tired of moods controlling his actions, tired of dreaming more than doing. That morning, he made himself a promise, a silent vow that his word would mean something, even when it hurt to keep it. Every day since, he practiced one thing, discipline. Not the cold kind that crushes joy, but the kind that directs energy with purpose. When the alarm rang, he rose. When excuses whispered, he silenced them. He spoke less, listened more, and chose his words as carefully as coins. Discipline, he learned, was not about denying life, it was about shaping it. It was the art of commanding thought, word, and action toward a chosen purpose. Some mornings, his emotions tried to lead him elsewhere, to comfort, to delay, to doubt, but Daniel reminded himself, My thoughts serve my vision, not my moods. He treated each day like a soldier following a captain's order. Every task completed was another promise kept, and every promise kept strengthened his will. The world did not change overnight, but Daniel felt something within him shift, a quiet power forming, a new respect for his own word. Then came the season of testing. His business plan, which he had built with months of work, fell apart. A trusted partner quit, investors withdrew, and people began to whisper that he was foolish to keep going. For a week, Daniel sat in silence, watching his efforts crumble. This was where most people stopped, at the wall of resistance. The place where progress slows, doubt grows, and dreams begin to die. But Daniel remembered another lesson, the law of persistent effort. His late mentor had once told him, "The world does not belong to the clever, it belongs to the constant." So, Daniel began again. Slowly, one step at a time. When the weight felt heavy, he took smaller steps. When fear crept in, he replaced it with action. There were no miracles, no sudden victories, only quiet persistence, repeated effort guided by faith. Some days he moved inches instead of miles, but he kept moving. He reminded himself, "Water wears down stone not by force, but by consistency." He stopped measuring how far he had to go and focused instead on the act of going. Months passed. The world around him still tested his patience. Deals delayed, friends doubted, results remained hidden. But Daniel's inner strength began to grow. His persistence became a rhythm, like the tide, patient, quiet, unending. Then came the storm point one night. A major client canceled their order. It was the final blow to his finances. His heart sank. He felt the sting of defeat, the pull of despair. For the first time in a long while, he questioned everything. Sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, Daniel looked at his notebook again. Beneath his earlier words, he wrote something new. "Adversity reveals, it does not ruin." He thought of the old oak tree near his childhood home, how it stood on the windiest hill, its roots gripping the earth tighter each time the storm hit. The stronger the wind, the deeper the roots grew. That night, Daniel realized that adversity was not an enemy but a teacher. Every setback held a lesson, patience, humility, faith, or strength. He stopped asking, "Why me?" and began asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" From that shift came peace that he worked again, but this time not with desperation, with quiet confidence. He no longer fought against his trials. He flowed with them, learning, adjusting, improving. He forgave those who doubted him, released anger, and thanked the struggle for making him sharper. Months later, success came, not as thunder, but as sunrise. Slowly, steadily, beautifully, the same investors who once left returned. His business grew stronger, not because the path became easier, but because he became greater than his circumstances. Daniel had mastered what few ever do, the harmony of discipline, persistence, and adversity. He learned that success is not a single act but a habit. It is built by promises kept, by faith maintained when sight is lost, and by seeing blessings hidden inside pain. One evening, as he closed his shop and watched the sunset, Daniel smiled and whispered, "Every storm was a teacher. Every delay was direction. Every hardship was strength in disguise." He finally understood what his mentor meant. The disciplined man is free. The persistent man is victorious. The one who welcomes adversity becomes unstoppable. And that night, Daniel wrote the final words in his notebook, the law he now lived by. Self-discipline builds the will. Persistence builds power. Adversity builds character. Together, they build destiny. He closed the book not as a dreamer, but as a doer, a man who had mastered himself and through that mastery, mastered his world. Hook, there is a quiet power in the person who controls his own mind. He doesn't rush when others panic. He doesn't speak when silence is wiser. He moves with calm purpose while others chase noise. That power is not luck or talent, it is mastery. It is the victory of inner direction, the triumph of discipline over emotion. Part 4. The law of inner direction. Ethan had learned to chase every spark of excitement. New projects, new ideas, new plans, each one started with passion and ended in exhaustion. He had the desire to succeed, but his mind scattered in every direction. Every time he failed to stay focused, he blamed luck, timing, or the world. But deep down, he knew the truth. He lacked control over himself. One morning, his mentor, Mr. Lawrence, called him to his small study. The old man spoke softly but with command. "Ethan, your mind is like a wild horse. It's strong, full of energy, but without control it will never carry you to your goal. You must learn to direct it, not follow it." Ethan frowned. "But how do I do that? I try to focus, but my thoughts keep wandering." Mr. Lawrence smiled. "Then you must give your mind an order, and mean it." That sentence stayed with Ethan. Give your mind an order. That night, instead of scrolling his phone or chasing a new idea, he sat quietly. He took a deep breath and said aloud, "Tomorrow I will lead my mind. It will serve my purpose." It felt strange at first. But something inside him shifted. For the first time, he realized he had been letting his emotions command his day. What to do, what to avoid, when to rest. Now, he would become the commander. The next morning, the test came quickly. His alarm rang at 5 a.m. His body begged for more sleep. His emotions whispered, "You can start tomorrow." But then he remembered his promise. "My thoughts obey my purpose," he said softly. And he rose. That single act, small as it seemed, was the first victory of discipline. Ethan began every day with the same ritual. He would sit in silence and set his direction. "Today I shall master myself," he would say. "My thoughts will obey my purpose. My actions will serve my vision." It wasn't easy. The mind, like a restless river, tried to drift back into old patterns, distraction, doubt, delay. But each time it did, Ethan gently pulled it back to focus. Day by day, he became stronger. His will began to lead, and his emotions began to follow. Mr. Lawrence once told him, "The difference between the great and the ordinary lies in this: the great do what must be done, not what is easy." Ethan began to see how true that was. When his friends spent their evenings wasting time, he spent his hours building the foundation of his dream business. When laziness whispered, "You've done enough," he reminded himself that greatness does not bloom from comfort. There were days when discouragement hit him hard. Projects failed. Clients didn't respond. Progress felt invisible. But he had learned another truth. Discipline isn't about how you feel, it's about what you do regardless of how you feel. He finished what he started. He completed tasks even when the excitement was gone. And slowly, the results began to show. One evening, he sat with Mr. Lawrence again. The old man poured tea and said, "Tell me, Ethan, what have you learned?" Ethan smiled. "That the undisciplined mind follows feelings, but the disciplined mind follows purpose. That every small act of self-control builds strength. And that my life goes where my thoughts go." Mr. Lawrence nodded. "Good. Now remember this: discipline is not punishment. It is freedom. The man who controls himself is free from fear, free from laziness, free from doubt. He becomes the master of his fate." Those words burned deep into Ethan's heart. From that day forward, he practiced discipline not as duty, but as delight. It became his habit, his protection, his path. He guarded his tongue, because once words are spoken, they cannot return. He guarded his habits, because habits become destiny. He guarded his thoughts, because thoughts become habits. When anger rose, he chose silence. When temptation whispered, he reminded himself that a moment of pleasure often leads to lasting regret. When laziness tried to take hold, he acted at once, and felt his strength double. Ethan learned that discipline is not denial, it is direction. It gives shape to energy, order to chaos, and peace to the mind. Without it, even talent fades. With it, even the ordinary becomes extraordinary. One morning, as he stood by the window watching the sunrise, he realized something powerful. Discipline had not made him rigid, it had made him free. He was no longer bound by moods or opinions. He was no longer pulled by circumstance. He was steady, focused, unshakable. He remembered the first words Mr. Lawrence had ever spoken to him. "You must learn to direct your mind." Now, he understood. Ethan's success came not from luck or brilliance, but from daily mastery over himself. Every act of restraint became a seed of strength. Every choice to stay the course built a layer of confidence. Every promise kept to himself became another brick in the foundation of his destiny. He had discovered the secret Napoleon Hill once wrote about. that the person who controls his mind controls his world. That evening, as the city lights flickered below his office window, Ethan wrote one final line in his journal. I am no longer a servant of my moods. I am the master of my mind. And in mastering myself, I have found peace, power, and freedom. He smiled as he closed the book. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing success, it was following him. Hook. Every person reaches a moment when life tests their will. When everything seems lost and the world turns silent, one question echoes in the heart. Will you keep going? Most give up when the road grows rough, but the few who rise in that storm discover a power stronger than talent, luck, or timing. That power is persistence, the quiet force that turns ordinary effort into extraordinary achievement. Part 5. The Law of Persistent Effort. The night was cold, the kind that makes a man question why he ever started. Jonathan sat at his small wooden desk, staring at a letter of rejection. It was the 5th one that month. His invention, a new kind of water pump for farmers, had been dismissed again. Not practical, they said. Too ambitious, they said. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. For years he had worked on this dream, sacrificing comfort and steady work. Yet success seemed always one step ahead, mocking him with its distance. He wanted to quit. But as he looked at the worn blueprint before him, he remembered the words of his late father, a farmer who had once struggled to keep his crops alive during a drought. Son, the earth only rewards the man who refuses to stop digging. Jonathan whispered those words aloud. Refused to stop digging. That night he made a decision. He would persist, not blindly, but with faith and direction. The next morning, he woke before sunrise. His hands were stiff, his eyes heavy, but his mind clear. He began to adjust his design once more, testing small changes. Each failure taught him something new. Each mistake revealed a hidden truth. There was a law he had learned through hardship, the law of persistent effort. The world, he realized, does not yield to brilliance alone, but to endurance, to the one who will not quit. Weeks turned into months. His savings ran thin. His friends told him to move on. Yet Jonathan's spirit did not break. Every time discouragement knocked, he answered with action. When doubt whispered, "You've done enough," he whispered back, "One more try." When fatigue said, "Rest," he said, "Later." When failure mocked, "It's hopeless," he said, "Watch me." He began to understand something deeper. Persistence was not just stubbornness. It was intelligent repetition guided by purpose. It was faith in motion. Each time he rebuilt his model, he found a new way to make it stronger. Like water carving through rock, his steady effort began to shape results. Slowly, progress appeared, not in sudden victories, but in quiet improvements. There were nights he worked under candlelight until dawn. Some days, his meals were only bread and water. But through it all, he carried one belief, that no labor done in faith is ever wasted. One morning, after nearly 3 years of work, his machine finally ran without fault. The pump worked perfectly, pulling water faster and more efficiently than any model before it. Jonathan's hands trembled as he watched it move, the sound of success steady and sure. But the test was not over. He had to convince others to believe in it. Rejection came again and again. Each no cut deeper than the last. Yet he remembered what he had written in his notebook. The world honors the finisher, not the starter. He pressed on. He visited farms, showed his invention, proved its value one demonstration at a time. Slowly, word spread. Farmers began to use his pump, and their results spoke louder than any advertisement could. Within a year, his design was known across 3 states. The same men who once doubted him now sought his advice. His company grew, but more than wealth, Jonathan had gained something greater, unshakable faith and persistence. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset over the fields, a young man from the nearby town came to visit. "Mr. Reed," he said, "I've failed twice trying to start my business. Maybe it's just not meant to be." Jonathan smiled gently. "Do you see those crops?" he asked, pointing to the horizon. "They grew from the same soil that once refused to yield. But the farmer didn't stop planting. He kept working the land, season after season, until it finally gave back." The young man nodded slowly. Jonathan continued, Success is not a single event. It's a series of steps, often small, often unseen. Each act of effort builds the foundation for the next. Just because the results are delayed doesn't mean they're denied. He leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. The question isn't whether your dream will test you, it will. The question is whether you'll keep moving when it does. That's where destiny is decided. That night, after the young man left, Jonathan opened his journal and wrote a final lesson, the truth his years had carved into him. Persistence is the bridge between desire and achievement. It is the fire that keeps burning when the winds of doubt try to put it out. It is the unseen force that breaks through resistance, not by brilliance, but by faith and endurance. He closed his notebook and smiled. He knew now that every delay, every rejection, every sleepless night had been necessary. Each one had shaped his strength, carved his patience, and deepened his will. He understood what Napoleon Hill meant when he said that persistence is the power that transforms failure into success. Because in the end, success doesn't belong to those who start with passion, it belongs to those who finish with faith. Jonathan looked once more at the fields that stretched before him, now watered by the very invention that almost never was. He whispered softly, "The harvest belongs not to the quick, but to the constant." And as the stars appeared, he felt a peace deeper than triumph, the quiet victory of a man who had learned that persistence, guided by purpose, is the true path to greatness. Look, there are moments in life when everything seems to fall apart, when the path ahead is hidden, the noise of doubt is loud, and every step feels heavy. But it is in those moments that one truth whispers to the heart: your mind is your greatest power. The person who controls his thoughts shapes his destiny. And that, my friend, is the ultimate secret to success, the power of a positive mental attitude. Part 6. The miracle of a positive mental attitude. Final part. It was a gray morning in Chicago when Emma sat at her small kitchen table, holding her head in her hands. Bills covered the table, and her eyes were red from sleepless nights. Her bakery had been struggling for months. The rent was late, her employees were losing hope, and the customers were fewer each day. She had done everything she could, marketing, new recipes, discounts, but nothing seemed to work. That morning, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the end." Just then, an old friend, Mrs. Lane, stopped by. She looked at Emma's tired face and said, "You remind me of myself 20 years ago. I was ready to give up too, until I learned something that changed my life forever. Your attitude decides your altitude." Emma frowned. "My attitude? How can that change anything? I need money, not thoughts." Mrs. Lane smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I once lost everything, my business, my home, even my confidence. But one day I came across Napoleon Hill's words, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. I started with belief, and everything else followed." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Those words echoed in her mind, conceive and believe. She realized she had been feeding her fears instead of her faith. She had allowed worry to shape her days instead of hope. The next morning, she stood before the mirror and spoke softly but firmly. "I will rebuild. My bakery will thrive again. I will attract opportunity, and I will not stop until I do." At first, it felt foolish. But she repeated those words daily. She began to smile again, not because things were perfect, but because she chose to believe they could be. Her attitude began to shift everything. Instead of saying, "I can't afford this," she asked, "How can I make this work?" Instead of blaming the economy, she searched for creative solutions. She greeted every customer with warmth and confidence, even when her heart felt heavy. Slowly, something changed. The same streets that once ignored her shop now brought new faces. People said they came because of her energy, her optimism, her light. Emma realized something profound: positivity attracts. It pulls opportunities, ideas, and people toward you. One day, a businessman visited her bakery. He told her he had been watching her transformation. "I see how you treat your customers," he said. "I see your persistence and spirit. I want to invest in your business." Within a year, her bakery expanded to 3 new locations. But the true victory wasn't the money, it was the person she had become. She learned that the miracle of success starts in the mind long before it appears in life. Emma began speaking to young entrepreneurs, sharing her journey. The difference between people who rise and those who fall, she told them, is not luck, it's mindset. One sees obstacles, the other sees opportunities. One says I can't, the other says I will find a way. Life responds to the attitude you choose. She often shared one of her favorite reflections. You cannot control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. And when you steer with faith and optimism, every storm becomes a path forward. Her story spread across her city. Newspapers called her the woman who baked her way back to success. But Emma always laughed and said, I didn't bake my way back, I believed my way back. Years later, when asked about her secret, she said, it's simple. What you hold in your mind, you hold in your life. Think fear, and you live small. Think faith, and you grow tall. Every great thing begins inside you. This was the miracle Napoleon Hill spoke of, the miracle of a positive mental attitude. It isn't magic. It's a mental discipline, a daily choice to think toward victory, not defeat. Life will test that attitude again and again. It will throw disappointments, rejections, and losses your way. But the person who keeps faith, who looks for the seed of benefit in every problem, will rise higher than the one who gives in to fear. Every challenge hides a lesson. Every failure carries a gift. And every dark moment is simply preparing you to appreciate the light when it returns. The wise do not ask, why me? They ask, what is this teaching me? That question transforms pain into progress. You see, Emma didn't change her circumstances first, she changed her thinking. Once her mind shifted, her life followed. That is how all transformation begins. There is a quiet power that comes from maintaining faith when the world doubts you, from speaking light when everything seems dark. The person who keeps a positive mental attitude in the midst of chaos becomes unstoppable, not because the world is easy, but because their spirit is steady. As Napoleon Hill taught, every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. The key is to look for it, nurture it, and let it grow. So, as you face your own battles, remember Emma's lesson. When fear rises, choose faith. When doubt whispers, choose confidence. When you want to quit, choose persistence. The world belongs to those who believe they can make a difference and refuse to stop believing until they do. Your thoughts are seeds. Plant courage, gratitude, and vision, and your harvest will come. Speak victory before it arrives. Walk as if success is already on its way. Because it is. And when that day comes, when your hard work blooms into results, remember that it all began with one simple choice: to think right when everything felt wrong. That is the miracle of a positive mental attitude. It's not about escaping difficulty, it's about mastering it from within. And once you master your thoughts, life begins to move in harmony with your vision. So keep faith. Keep believing. Keep moving forward with a calm mind, a grateful heart, and an unshakable will. Because the person who thinks right, lives right. And the one who lives right, wins, always. Call to action. If this story inspired you, make sure to subscribe, share, and comment your thoughts below. Let's keep spreading positivity, persistence, and purpose together.